back in control in this match. Black has won the 2 decisive games, and Black was winning the 1 game that petered out into a repetition. So some issues to be solved. That was the theme yesterday in the opening pool play that both of these players came out of. Black scored 66% in yesterday's opening pool, and now Black has won 2.5 out of 3 and really could have gone 3-0, but we're back to all square. I have to say, though, Yovi, Yuj has 2 blacks from the remaining 3 games. I guess that's an advantage. Best of 6, tied 1.5 to 1.5.
I think before this whole event started, you would never have heard those words from us. But as I say, Black is absolutely more than okay, especially here at the ChessKid Youth Championships. So here, okay, well, Black does have the bishop pair, but White is taking control of the center. So I'm expecting Black to go in the direction of going d6, just holding firm. But if Black is going to be striking out with, say, for instance, pawn takes d4 and then d5, the time is now.
Yeah, exactly. And I know I'm going to have to eat my words. Luckily, I didn't have to eat that pawn a minute ago. But we did say when your king is stuck in the middle, you don't want to open the center. That's exactly what White has done. Now that the center starts to open, I think White needs to get the king out of the middle. And in fact, he does. I don't think it was quite time for Black to play d5. And so that's why White could get away with it for just that 1 move. But once again, is the bishop a strength or a weakness? That dark squared bishop, I believe 2 games ago, ended up getting in the game. Yuj won a very long battle of knight versus bishop. But once again, we see this bishop not being so great. Although, unlike in game 2, the bishop can immediately reroute himself to a better diagonal, whereas it took Yuj the better part of 40 moves to get that bishop in the game. But once he did, he took control and he won game 2.
Yeah, and also the big question for Black is this bishop on c8. It really wants to be on e6, exchanging itself for that mighty bishop on c4. So that's why we're seeing queen e7. But if you do that, then you get rid of the advantage of the bishop pair. And also, I got to say, I like the way that Sina is playing this, because g3, again, just controls those knight jumps to f4 and h4.
Absolutely. And, one of the interesting things about this match is that there is no break in the 6 games. I'll bet you if we had instituted a break, Schach Mehmediyarov would have given a call to Yuj and said, play faster, because look at the clock. It is now a 1 and 10-second advantage already in the opening. We're at move 16, and Yuj has used almost 2/3 of his time. Now, he's a far better player than I could ever dream to be, and he's almost lived to tell the tale in all 3 games. But he was in big trouble in game 1. And in the last game that we just saw, he just, the clock was definitely a factor in him not being able to hold that endgame. It was a crazy pawn imbalance endgame. He's got to play faster.
And I was going to say, what is stopping White from grabbing that pawn on e5? And the answer was there was nothing. And what is going to be the response? Rook to e8. So I guess the idea is just simply to step back or step forward with the bishop and then target e4.
Yeah, he's just playing the long-term game of, hey, you want my pawn? Okay, I'm going to win it back. Might take me 5 moves, but my bishop is going to gain some life. So almost an intuitive pawn sacrifice, if I had to guess.
Okay, well, really mature, actually. But now the pawn on e4 is under threat. But one thing we've seen with Sina, he's so good in situations where he's material up and he has to go on the defensive to neutralize his opponent's initiative. I like this move e5 a lot because it's inviting those simplifications. And now decision time, do you take that bishop? Okay, at a5, threatening to go the whole way with a6 just to destabilize the queen side. And there's a pin on the board. That's why Erdogmus vacates the e-line very quickly. And once again, we have that situation with opposite color bishops, where the bishops need to be effective in looking at a target. This bishop on f3 needs to be somewhere, say, on c4, looking at f7. And the bishop on d6 also needs to be doing the same.
We'll see if he can reroute the bishop. Honestly, I'm surprised he never played knight takes e5 and played bishop versus knight. That would be the inverse of their last time with these colors. Because in the long run, I do believe the bishop is going to annoy these pawns in the endgame. In fact, one of the things that grandmasters do so well is they try to envision what endgames they're going for. If you could imagine a position, Yovi, with just bishop versus knight and the remaining pawns on the board, White would have the advantage because the knight would have to babysit these pawns the rest of the game. But that didn't happen. We have opposite colored bishops. The first player that gets their bishop to an active square is probably going to be better. And by the way, if the bishop does maneuver around to c4, queen takes g6 is in the air. That was my mortal weakness growing up. We will see if that bishop finds itself on a more active square in a couple moves. Queen d7 might be coming.
Yeah, exactly. And I was going to say, you know, this bishop maneuvering itself to f6 is very clever, because suddenly Black is just reminding White that it's not just one-way traffic, that the pawns on c3, b4, and a5, they are on dark squares and therefore perfect munching ground. And look at this retreat. Next idea is to go rook to e8. And we might just see a simple clarification, though, on the queen side, as I suspect absolutely everything will come off. Okay, this is an invitation to take it to an opposite color bishop endgame. It's a difficult one because actually the pawns on the queen side for White are potentially very, very weak.
Yeah, if the rooks had traded, I think we would have turned into a checkers game where we would have had double jumps on all the pawns. I think the black bishop would have captured all the white pawns and the white bishop would have captured all the black pawns. But luckily, we're still playing chess. White gets one of those pawns at least off of the dark squares, and black follows suit by getting one of his pawns off of the light squares. So they're trying to put their pawns on much safer squares. And the white rook, though, is slightly more active. The bishops are both equal. Well, maybe the white bishop's got a little bit more of a target, but the white rook I like a little bit more. Pawn to b5, and now White's going to get an outside pass pawn. By the way, White's promotion square is a light square, exactly where his bishop is, so White has slightly better chances, but objectively it should still be a draw.
Yeah, but it's getting really sharp here because we're off to the races. Look at the c-pawn go, you know, 2 squares away from queening. How to stop that one? So he's banking on ideas such as rook to c7, and just make sure that it's White to play. Rook to c7, yes, indeed, is the move. Only move that I could see to defend this one. And now you have to go bishop takes b7. And the white rook is perfectly placed behind its enemy pawn. But, I mean, can you do that? But rook to b5, this was something that concerned me. I guess after rook takes b6, you've got, I was thinking bishop to d5, but instead this whole rerouting. Oh, this is really tricky, Mike. Even though the evaluation bar is like level, I don't think this is at all easy.
Yeah, you got 6 seconds left. You got to figure out which piece to take on f7 with, and can you guard the c pawn? So he gives a discovered check, keeping an eye on the pawn. He's going to have to move the bishop. It looks like he will collect the pawn. And you know what we're going to see, which we didn't see almost any of yesterday, is one player pushing a drawn position to its max. And that's a great move by Black. Getting the rooks off of the board makes this light years easier to hold. Now all Black has to do is not move the king or the pawn ever, wait for White to play f4, and just sack for the remaining pawn. In fact, Sina doesn't even try to push the advantage at all. They make a draw. They're tied 2-2 with